What's up, brand builders? Stephen Hurahan here at brandmasteracademy.com, and in this video I'm talking positioning versus differentiation versus distinctiveness. So we can meet this debate head on and find out what the biggest marketers in the world are saying about it before bringing it back into the real world to see how we can use it in our brand building. Now, if you're new to the channel and you want to build brands that go beyond the visuals and the logo using strategy, psychology, and creative thinking, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. If you want to fast track your results, make sure you grab the Pro Brand Strategy Blueprint. It's a free download and the link is in the description. Now, in recent years, there has been this growing debate around differentiation and distinctiveness and why people choose the brands that they do, what kind of influence that we can have as brand builders over their decision-making process. On one side, you have some that will say that you just need to tap into the belief behind what you do, that people just buy why you do what you do, not actually what you do. And on the other hand, you have others that will say that there is no such thing or no real ability to differentiate your brand these days. It's all about availability and distinctiveness. So we're going to look at the differences of opinion here. We're going to look at the opinions on one side versus the other side, and we're going to break them down and see what they really mean in the real world. So let's start with positioning. Now, positioning has been around for about 40 years. The concept of positioning was brought into fruition by Reiss and Jack Trout with their book in the early 80s, Positioning: A Battle for Your Mind. And this influenced a lot within the marketing industry and influenced a lot of universities and influenced a lot of modern textbooks today. And that is now a cornerstone belief that you need to position your brand effectively in order to give your audience a meaning as to why they should choose your brand. As Reiss and Jack Trout said, the basic approach of positioning is not to create something new and different, but to manipulate what's already up there in the mind, to retie the connections that already exist. So what is differentiation? Well, differentiation, or your differentiation strategy, is the fundamental reason that you give your audience to choose your brand when compared to your competitors. So your differentiation strategy is ultimately the reason that you are different from the rest of the market. Now, this has been around for a long time, since the 60s, when the USP was the real framework that everybody used as the leading edge of communication. So what brands communicated was their unique selling proposition, and that dictated all of their messaging. And as I said, that's been around, and that concept has been around since the 60s. Now, even those who subscribe to the idea that you must differentiate or die also have differences of opinion as to how you can differentiate. In 2009, Simon Sinek came out with a book that was pretty idealistic, but really had a lot of influence at the time on major brand leaders. Now, he came into the arena with this idea that pretty much all brands know what they do. Some brands know how they do it, but very few brands know why they do what they do. And then he went on to say that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. Now, that book was followed up in 2011 by another book called Grow that had a similar message. Now, this book was by a marketer by the name of Jim Stengel. Now, Jim Stengel was the former CMO of Procter & Gamble, so one of the most influential marketers of his time. And as I said, his book Grow had a very similar message to the Start With Why book by Simon Sinek, and that was that brands with high ideals outperform the rest of the market. And within his research, he found that the index that he called his Stengel 50, which were the top 50 brands of his choice that had high ideals, outperformed the S&P 500 by 400%. So this started to put a little bit of science and research behind this idea that brands with high ideals, or brands with a brand purpose or a belief in why they did what they did, had an influence over the bottom line and the performance of the business. And Jim Stengel went on to say that maximum growth and high ideals are not incompatible, they're inseparable. Now, way back in 2002, Seth Godin, who is one of the most respected marketing voices on the market, and there are a lot of marketing voices today, he came out with his book, Purple Cow. Now, Purple Cow threw down the gauntlet for brands to go out and be remarkable, be completely different. And he really believed that mass marketing was dead and you really had to be remarkable and choose exactly who you want to be for and be unique to that group of people. In a quote from his book, he said, "I believe we've now reached a point where we can no longer market directly to the masses. Traditional approaches are now obsolete and 100 years of marketing thought are gone. Alternative approaches aren't a novelty, they're all we've got left." So what is brand distinctiveness? Well, that's a brand's ability to be able to stand out visually to its audience when compared to its competitors. Now, visual distinctiveness leads to brand salience, which has been proven to impact the buying decision. Now, essentially, the way you provide brand distinctiveness, or the way you make sure that your brand is visually distinctive, is by creating as many quality visual assets as possible, or as many distinctive brand assets as possible. And these can include your logo or your image style or your tagline or even your audio. Now, of course, the more distinctive brand assets you have, the more effective those assets are, the more chance your brand has of being remembered and obviously being chosen in that buying decision. Now, Byron Sharp is a marketing professor and a marketing scientist at the Ehrenberg Bass University of Marketing Science in South Australia. Now, his 2010 book, How Brands Grow, was an absolute flamethrower to traditional marketing ideals, traditional marketing concepts and philosophies. And it really did rock the marketing world because it went in the face of everything that marketing professionals and branding professionals held dear about positioning and differentiation. Byron Sharp, through his research, now believes that differentiation is not possible and consumers don't think too much about brands, and the reason that they choose brands is largely based on their physical and mental availability and their distinctiveness. He said the most important part of any buyer's purchasing process occurs before buyers consciously evaluate which brands to choose. Buyers, in effect, decide not to consider the vast majority of brands on the market. Instead, they notice only a few and quite often only one. So who's right and how do we make sense of all this? I mean, this is the marketing elite here and they're having a completely difference of opinion. They're not having a little debate about a little aspect of branding. This is the entirety of branding. These are the fundamental concepts of why people choose the brands that they do. So how do we break all of this down? On one hand, you have Jim Stengel putting brand ideals on a pedestal, and that's backed up by Simon Sinek saying that people only buy why we do what we do. Now, in reality, if we build our brands like that, believing that people are going to buy our brands because why we do what we do, then we're going to be left pretty disappointed, because in reality, that's not how people are going to buy their brands. They're not going to buy based purely on why a brand does what they do. And then on the other hand, with Byron Sharp, people don't just buy based on availability and distinctiveness. They really think about the brands that they buy, and sometimes they go out of their way to buy the brands that they do. So I believe that the reality is somewhere in the middle, and it's our job as professional brand builders to decide what our own ideas are and what our own philosophies are. And this is my philosophy. There are many reasons that the audience might choose your brand, but at its most simplistic form, branding is about providing meaning. And the meaning that your audience has with your brand becomes the reason that they choose your brand. You cannot be all things to everybody, so choose what you want to mean to your audience and let that be the reason they choose your brand.